late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the bustling streets of Charleston, South Carolina. The city, with its cobblestone streets and grand antebellum houses, exuded an air of charm and old-money elegance. Among the gleaming SUVs and sedans lining the historic district, a man shuffled along the sidewalk. His tattered jacket flapped in the gentle breeze, his scuffed boots barely holding together with each step. To the passers-by, he was invisible, a shadow against the glittering backdrop of wealth and refinement. But this man was no ordinary drifter. Beneath the frayed clothing and carefully cultivated appearance was Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. Today, however, he wasn't a billionaire innovator. He was an everyman, a nobody. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Elon had spent weeks preparing for this experiment, meticulously crafting his disguise. His usually sharp, piercing eyes were partially hidden beneath the brim of a faded baseball cap. A wiry, uneven beard covered his face, and his posture slouched to mimic the weariness of a man accustomed to life's hard edges. For someone whose presence often commanded a room, learning to shrink into anonymity had been a challenge. The idea for this experiment had come to Elon after hearing countless stories of how those perceived as less than were treated in spaces built to serve everyone. Banks, in particular, fascinated him, not for their services but for the unspoken rules they seemed to follow. Wealth opened doors, but what happened when someone appeared destitute? Did humanity vanish along with the money? Today, he intended to find out. He paused in front of Charleston Trust Bank, a stately institution housed in a building of polished granite and tall columns. The bank's motto, etched in gold letters above the entrance, read, "Service with Integrity." Elon smiled faintly, the irony not lost on him. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of polished wood and leather. A chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling, scattering light onto the marble floor below. Customers sat in plush armchairs, sipping complimentary coffee from porcelain cups as impeccably dressed bankers flitted about like birds of paradise. Elon stepped across the threshold, his boots squeaking faintly against the polished floor. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the air like a low current. "Can I help you?" A sharp voice rang out. Elon turned toward the reception desk, where a middle-aged woman stood, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against the counter. Her name tag read Susan. Her pristine blazer and coiffed hair marked her as someone who took her position, and herself, very seriously. Elon approached, his hands deep in his pockets. "I'd like to open an account," he said, his voice calm but deliberate. Susan's eyes swept over him, taking in the frayed seams of his jacket, the threadbare knees of his jeans, and the battered boots. Her polite smile was thin and forced, as if it were a mask she barely wanted to wear. "Our minimum opening deposit is $1,000, she said crisply. "Do you have the necessary funds with you today?" Elon reached into his pocket and produced a crumpled $10 bill, smoothing it out on the counter. "I have this," he said simply, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, Susan was silent. Then, a small, almost imperceptible scoff escaped her lips. "I'm afraid that won't be sufficient," she replied, her tone now icy. "Perhaps you'd be better served at one of the local credit unions." The rejection stung, but Elon had anticipated it. Still, it wasn't the words that hurt, it was the sheer ease with which they were delivered, the practiced indifference in her tone. He could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on him, not just from Susan but from the other customers and staff, whose glances were like daggers. "I understand," Elon said, stepping back from the counter. His voice remained steady, though his heart raced. He had prepared for this, but the sting of exclusion was sharper than he'd imagined. As he turned to leave, his eyes caught those of a young woman seated at a nearby desk. Her name tag read Anna. Unlike the others, her gaze wasn't filled with disdain or mockery. Instead, it held a flicker of something Elon couldn't quite place, curiosity perhaps, or even discomfort. She looked away quickly, her cheeks flushing, but the moment stayed with him. Outside, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Elon sat on a weathered bench across from the bank, his thoughts swirling. The experience had been predictable, yet profoundly unsettling. For all his wealth and power, he had just tasted a sliver of what millions face daily: dismissal, disregard, and the quiet humiliation of being deemed unworthy. As the evening deepened, the door to Charleston Trust Bank swung open, and the young woman from earlier emerged. Anna hesitated on the steps, glancing around as if searching for something, or someone. Finally, her eyes landed on Elon, still seated on the bench. She squared her shoulders and crossed the street toward him. "Excuse me," she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. Elon looked up, meeting her gaze. Up close, she seemed even younger, perhaps in her mid-20s, with a nervous energy that made her shift from one foot to the other. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened in there," Anna said, gesturing toward the bank. "It wasn't right." Elon studied her for a moment, his sharp mind assessing her sincerity. "You work there, don't you?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, her cheeks reddening. "But I don't. I mean, not everyone there thinks that way." "Then why didn't you speak up?" Elon's question wasn't accusatory, but it struck a chord. Anna looked down, fiddling with the hem of her blazer. "I wanted to," she said quietly. "But I'm just a trainee. I don't have much say in how things are done." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Elon said, "It's not easy to stand up against the tide. But sometimes, it's the only way things change." As Anna returned to the bank, Elon remained on the bench, his thoughts no longer stormy but contemplative. This experiment was revealing more than just the flaws in the system. It was exposing the cracks where humanity still shone through. And in Anna, he saw a glimmer of hope. Across the street, Anna hesitated in the doorway of the bank, stealing a glance back at the bench. Something about the man, his calm demeanor, his quiet dignity, stayed with her. She didn't know his name or his story, but she felt certain he was far more than he seemed. That evening, Elon returned to his modest hotel room, peeling off the layers of his disguise. As he stared at his reflection in the mirror, a thought struck him. The real experiment isn't about how they treat me. It's about what they reveal about themselves, and what I can do with that knowledge. Far from ending his experiment, today had solidified its purpose. Tomorrow he would return, not just to Charleston Trust Bank, but to the countless institutions where appearances dictated worth. He would observe, endure, and perhaps, just perhaps, find others like Anna, people who could be the catalysts for change. And as the city settled into quiet slumber, Elon Musk, the man who had touched the stars, prepared to challenge the ground beneath his feet. The next morning, the air was crisp as Elon Musk walked back toward Charleston Trust Bank. The early sun filtered through the grand oak trees lining the street, dappling the sidewalk with soft patches of light. The city was just waking up, with shopkeepers sweeping sidewalks and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting from nearby cafes. But Elon's mind was not on the idyllic charm of the scene. He was replaying the interactions from the day before, the dismissive glances, the cur. Inside, Charleston Trust Bank buzzed with the quiet hum of business as usual. The marble floors gleamed under the morning light, and the staff moved with the confidence of routine. Susan, the receptionist from the previous day, adjusted her blazer as she prepared to meet another morning of clients. To her, the man in tattered clothing from the day before was a fleeting nuisance, easily forgotten in the grander rhythm of her work. But for Anna, his presence lingered in her mind like an unresolved chord. Elon stepped through the heavy glass doors, his worn boots squeaking slightly as they met the polished floor. The sound, though faint, seemed to echo through the bank's pristine interior. Heads turned once more, and conversations quieted as the sight of him disrupted the rhythm. Elon felt the weight of their stares, but he had steeled himself for this moment. Susan's sharp eyes flicked toward him from behind the reception desk. Her mouth pressed into a thin line, and her manicured nails resumed their tapping against the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone colder than yesterday. "Yes," Elon replied evenly. "I'd like to open an account." Susan's lips twitched as if holding back a scoff. "As I mentioned yesterday, our minimum opening deposit is $1,000, she said, enunciating each word with deliberate precision, as though explaining something painfully simple. "Do you have that amount with you today?" Elon reached into his pocket, retrieving the same crumpled $10 bill. He smoothed it out on the counter with deliberate care, its faded edges a stark contrast to the gleaming surface beneath it. "This is what I have," he said, his voice calm but firm. Susan's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of disdain passing across her features before she caught herself. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Sir, this is Charleston Trust Bank. We cater to a different clientele. Perhaps a credit union or a community bank would better suit your circumstances." The words were laced with condescension, each syllable carefully calibrated to sting without breaking decorum. Elon felt a pang of vulnerability, a rare emotion for a man accustomed to commanding respect wherever he went. From her desk across the lobby, Anna watched the interaction unfold. Her heart clenched as she observed the subtle cruelty in Susan's demeanor and the quiet dignity with which Elon absorbed it. She wanted to intervene, to step in and say something, anything, but the rules of the institution felt like shackles around her will. Her hands trembled slightly as she fiddled with the edge of a file, her mind racing with the memory of his calm voice from the day before. "Why didn't you speak up?" his question echoed in her thoughts. Anna had spent most of the previous night wrestling with her guilt, replaying the scene over and over. She had always prided herself on being someone who cared, someone who believed in fairness and humanity. And yet, when faced with the opportunity to act, she had remained silent. As Susan's voice rose slightly, Anna's resolve hardened. She couldn't let this moment pass without doing something. Susan pressed a small button on her desk, summoning the bank's security guard. A tall man in a neatly pressed uniform appeared moments later, his presence imposing but not aggressive. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone professional but firm. "No problem," Elon replied, his eyes steady as they met the guard's. "I was just told I don't belong here." The guard hesitated, glancing toward Susan for confirmation. She offered a tight smile. "I was simply explaining our policies," she said smoothly. "This gentleman doesn't meet the requirements for opening an account." Elon nodded, taking a small step back. He had come here to test more than the bank's policies. He had come to test their humanity. And the results, while expected, were no less disheartening. But just as he turned to leave, a voice cut through the tension. "Wait," Anna said, her words trembling slightly but gaining strength as she spoke. She stood from her desk, clutching a small stack of papers as if to anchor herself. "If he wants to open an account, I can help him." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Anna, whose cheeks flushed under the weight of the attention. Susan's mouth tightened, her polished veneer cracking ever so slightly. "Anna," she said sharply, "this isn't your decision to make." "I know," Anna replied, her voice steadier now. "But it's not right to dismiss someone just because they don't meet an arbitrary threshold. Everyone deserves a chance to manage their money, no matter how much or how little they have." Elon's gaze softened as he looked at Anna, gratitude flickering in his eyes. He hadn't expected an ally, least of all in someone so young and new to the institution. For a moment, he felt a strange sense of hope, a reminder that even in systems designed to exclude, there were individuals willing to push back. Susan opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, the bank's manager emerged from his office. Mr. Reynolds was a man in his mid-50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of authority that silenced the room as he approached. "What's going on here?" he asked, his sharp eyes moving between Susan, Anna, and Elon. Susan was quick to respond. "This gentleman is attempting to open an account but doesn't meet the minimum deposit requirement," she explained, her tone laced with annoyance. "Anna seems to think she can make exceptions." Mr. Reynolds turned his gaze to Anna, who stood her ground despite the rapid pounding of her heart. "Sir," she said, addressing Elon directly, "if you'd like, I can assist you at my desk." Reynolds raised an eyebrow but didn't immediately intervene. Instead, he studied Elon, his expression inscrutable. Finally, he gestured toward Anna. "If you're willing to take responsibility for this, go ahead," he said, his tone carrying a note of warning. Anna nodded, her chest tightening with a mix of nerves and determination. She gestured for Elon to follow her, and together they walked to her desk. As they sat down, Anna offered a small tentative smile. "I'm sorry for how you were treated earlier," she said quietly. "I'll do my best to help." Elon studied her for a moment before replying. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm but measured. "It's not easy to do what you just did." Anna blushed slightly but kept her focus on the task at hand. As she entered his information into the system, she couldn't help but wonder about the man sitting across from her. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite place. He didn't fit the mold of the average person struggling to get by. There was a quiet confidence in his demeanor, a sense of purpose that intrigued her. Elon Musk sat on the same weathered bench outside Charleston Trust Bank, his gaze fixed on the flow of life around him. The steady hum of passing cars, the occasional burst of laughter from pedestrians, and the rustling leaves of the oak trees overhead created a symphony of ordinary moments. Yet, Elon's mind was far from the mundane. He was deep in thought, reflecting on the events of the morning and the quiet defiance of Anna, the young trainee who had dared to stand against the unspoken rules of her workplace. For Elon, this experiment had always been about peeling back the layers of a system built to serve the elite, exposing the fractures where humanity was overshadowed by policy. Anna's decision to help him had been a crack in the armor of indifference. It was a small act, but one that carried immense weight. Inside the bank, Anna sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she filed paperwork from her interaction with Elon. The adrenaline from earlier had subsided, leaving behind a mix of fear and exhilaration. She replayed the scene in her mind, Susan's sharp tone, Mr. Reynolds's watchful gaze, and Elon's calm, unwavering demeanor. Her decision to help him had felt instinctive, driven by a deep sense of fairness she couldn't ignore. But now, doubt began to creep in. Had she overstepped her role? Would there be consequences? Anna bit her lip, glancing toward Susan, who was now engrossed in a conversation with a well-dressed couple. The older woman hadn't said a word to her since the incident, but her disapproving glances spoke volumes. Anna, a familiar voice called softly. She turned to see David, a fellow trainee, standing by her desk. David was a few years older than Anna, with a calm, steady presence that often put her at ease. "What was that all about?" he asked, his tone neutral but curious. Anna hesitated, unsure how much to share. "I just felt like I needed to help him," she said finally. "It didn't feel right to turn him away like that." David raised an eyebrow, his expression thoughtful. "You've got guts," he said after a moment. "But be careful. Not everyone here sees things the way you do." Anna nodded, grateful for his quiet support. Still, his words only added to her unease. She couldn't help but wonder, had she done the right thing, or had she just made things harder for herself? The next day, Elon returned to the bank, his appearance unchanged. He walked through the glass doors with the same deliberate stride, his tattered jacket and scuffed boots standing in stark contrast to the polished elegance of the lobby. This time, the whispers started almost immediately. Customers exchanged knowing looks, and even the staff couldn't hide their curiosity. Susan's eyes narrowed as she spotted him. "He's back," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for the teller next to her to hear. Elon approached Anna's desk, his movements slow but purposeful. Anna looked up, her heart skipping a beat when she recognized him. She felt a mix of relief and anxiety. His presence, though unexpected, reassured her that she hadn't been wrong to help him. But she also knew his return would draw attention. "Good morning, Anna," Elon said, his tone warm but subdued. "Good morning," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to make a deposit," he said, placing a neatly folded stack of bills on her desk. Anna blinked, her eyes widening slightly as she counted the money. $200. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a significant step up from the crumpled $10 bill he had presented yesterday. Susan, who had been watching the interaction closely, frowned. "What's going on over there?" she asked, her tone sharp. Anna glanced up but kept her focus on the task at hand. "Just assisting a client," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Susan's heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached. She stopped a few feet from Anna's desk, her arms crossed. "Haven't we already dealt with him?" she asked, her gaze fixed on Elon. "I'm handling it," Anna said firmly, meeting Susan's stare. The tension in the air was palpable, but Anna refused to back down. She completed the transaction quickly, sliding the receipt across the desk to Elon. "Here you go," she said, her voice steady. Elon took the receipt with a small smile. "Thank you," he said, his words carrying an unmistakable sincerity. He turned to leave, but not before casting a final glance at Susan. "It's nice to know some people here still believe in service," he said, his tone polite but pointed. As Elon stepped back out into the sunlight, Anna felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had stood her ground, but the weight of the encounter lingered. Susan's reaction had been predictable, but the judgment from her colleagues, whispers, sideways glances, the subtle shifts in their demeanor, stung in a way she hadn't anticipated. At lunch, Anna sat alone at a small cafe down the street, nursing a cup of coffee. The events of the past 2 days swirled in her mind, leaving her restless. She thought of Elon's quiet determination, the way he had absorbed the scorn and dismissal without flinching. There was a dignity in his demeanor that she couldn't ignore, a sense of purpose that seemed far greater than simply opening a bank account. That evening, as the bank closed and the last customers trickled out, Anna lingered at her desk, organizing files that didn't need organizing. She wasn't ready to go home, not yet. The day had left her unsettled, and she needed a moment to process. To her surprise, the front door swung open, and Elon stepped inside. He had shed the weariness of earlier, his posture straighter and his expression more resolute. He walked toward Anna with the same calm confidence that had marked his every move. "Mr. Musk," Anna began, standing up from her desk. "I wasn't expecting you back so soon." "I didn't want to leave without saying thank you," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. "What you did today, and yesterday, it mattered." Anna felt a lump rise in her throat. "I just did what I thought was right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon smiled faintly. "Sometimes, doing the right thing isn't easy. But it's always worth it." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Elon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He placed it on her desk, his eyes meeting hers. "What's this?" Anna asked, her brow furrowing. "A note," Elon replied simply. "For the next time someone questions why you choose to do what's right." Before Anna could respond, Elon turned and walked toward the door. He paused briefly, his hand on the handle, and looked back. "You're braver than you realize, Anna. Don't forget that." And with that, he was gone. As Anna unfolded the note, her hands trembling slightly, she read the words written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "One small act of courage can change everything." Tears pricked her eyes as she folded the note and tucked it into her pocket. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose. She had made a difference, however small, and that was enough. Outside, Elon walked away from the bank, the golden hues of the setting sun painting the streets in warm light. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not because he had uncovered the flaws of the institution, but because he had found something far more valuable, a spark of humanity, the kind that could light the way for others. And as he disappeared into the shadows of the city, he knew his experiment was far from over. The real work was only just beginning. The following morning, the Charleston Trust Bank bustled with its usual rhythm, polished shoes clicking against marble floors, muted conversations about investments and loans, and the steady hum of air conditioning. Yet, beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension rippled through the staff. The man in the tattered coat had become a topic of whispered speculation. His persistence, coupled with Anna's unorthodox actions, had unsettled the carefully cultivated facade of professionalism. Anna arrived at the bank earlier than usual. She sat at her desk, the weight of the previous days pressing heavily on her. The folded note from Elon was still tucked into her blazer pocket, its words etched in her mind. "One small act of courage can change everything." She ran her fingers over the edge of the paper, finding solace in its simplicity. Yet doubts lingered. Had she truly done the right thing? Would her small act of defiance lead to repercussions she wasn't prepared to face? As the first clients entered the bank, Anna squared her shoulders, steeling herself for whatever the day might bring. The sound of the glass doors opening drew every gaze in the lobby. This time, Elon Musk walked in with a purpose that could not be ignored. Gone with a tattered jacket and scuffed boots. Instead, he wore a simple but well-tailored suit, understated yet commanding. His presence was magnetic, exuding a quiet authority that silenced the whispers before they could begin. Susan, stationed at the reception desk, froze. Her practiced smile faltered as recognition dawned. She straightened her posture, smoothing her blouse as she struggled to reconcile the man before her with the figure she had dismissed so easily days prior. "Good morning," Elon said, his voice even but firm. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Susan blinked, her usual confidence evaporating under his gaze. "Oh, of course," she stammered, reaching for the phone to summon Mr. Reynolds. Anna watched from her desk, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of the moment but couldn't fully grasp its significance. Why had Elon returned, and why did he look so different? Her eyes followed him as he stood in the middle of the lobby, his posture relaxed but purposeful. Within minutes, Mr. Reynolds emerged from his office. The manager, known for his measured demeanor, looked slightly flustered as he approached Elon. "Good morning," Reynolds began, extending his hand. "I understand you'd like to speak with me. How can I assist you?" Elon accepted the handshake, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps we should talk in your office," he said. Reynolds nodded quickly, gesturing for Elon to follow him. As the two men disappeared behind the heavy wooden door, the air in the lobby grew thick with speculation. Staff exchanged glances, their curiosity barely concealed. Anna, however, felt a growing unease. She busied herself with paperwork, trying to ignore the knot tightening in her stomach. Whatever was happening behind that door, she had a sinking feeling it would change everything. Inside the office, Elon sat across from Reynolds, his demeanor calm but commanding. Reynolds, on the other hand, fidgeted slightly, the cracks in his composure beginning to show. "I'd like to start by introducing myself properly," Elon said, his tone measured. "My name is Elon Musk." Reynolds's eyes widened, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. "The Elon Musk?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Elon nodded. "I've spent the past few weeks visiting financial institutions across the country, conducting an experiment of sorts. I wanted to see how people like me, people who don't fit the mold of wealth or status, are treated." Reynolds's face paled. "I see," he said cautiously. "What I saw here," Elon continued, his voice hardening slightly, was deeply troubling. "Your staff, with one notable exception, was dismissive, condescending, and more concerned with appearances than service. That's not what banking should be about." Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but Elon held up a hand to silence him. "I'm not here to debate," he said. "I'm here to take action. I've already initiated the paperwork to acquire Charleston Trust Bank." The room fell silent, the gravity of Elon's words sinking in. Reynolds's hands clenched the armrests of his chair as he struggled to process the declaration. You're acquiring the bank," he stammered. "Yes," Elon said simply. "And my first order of business will be to overhaul its culture and policies. This institution will become a place where everyone, regardless of their circumstances, is treated with dignity and respect." When Elon exited the office, the lobby fell silent. His gaze swept across the room, finally landing on Anna. He walked toward her desk, his expression softening. "Anna," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "your actions didn't just make a difference to me. They reminded me why I started this experiment in the first place." Anna blinked, her cheeks flushing as the weight of his words settled over her. "Mr. Musk, she began, but he interrupted her gently. "Call me Elon," he said with a small smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on her desk. "I'd like you to join my team. Effective immediately." The room erupted into murmurs as staff and clients alike tried to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Anna stared at the card, her mind racing. She had dreamed of making a difference, but she had never imagined an opportunity like this. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Say yes," Elon replied simply. Anna looked around the room, taking in the shocked faces of her colleagues and the encouraging smile on Elon's face. She thought of the note in her pocket, the quiet moments of doubt and resolve, and the belief that one act of courage could spark change. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady. Elon extended his hand, and as Anna shook it, she felt a surge of confidence unlike anything she had experienced before. This was the beginning of something far greater than she had ever imagined. That evening, as the sun set over Charleston, Anna stood outside the bank, her mind still reeling from the day's events. She glanced at the card in her hand, the name Elon Musk printed in bold, unassuming letters. Her heart swelled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: she was ready to face it. Across the street, Elon watched her from the shadows, a faint smile playing on his lips. The experiment had revealed more than he had hoped. In Anna, he had found not just an ally but a kindred spirit, a reminder that even in a system fraught with flaws, there were those who refused to lose sight of humanity. And as he walked away, the city bathed in the golden glow of dusk, Elon knew their journey was only just beginning. Together, they would challenge the system, reshape its foundations, and prove that one small act of courage could indeed change everything. Sometimes, it only takes one act of courage to spark a transformation. From Anna's story, we see how a single decision, to treat someone with empathy instead of judgment, set the wheels of change in motion. But doesn't that same principle apply to our own lives? What small courageous choice could you make today to reshape your world or inspire someone else? Anna's journey with Elon Musk is more than a story about banking. It's a testament to the power of belief and action. It challenges us to ask, in systems we encounter every day, at work, in our communities, even within ourselves, are we content to accept the status quo, or are we brave enough to envision something better? As we follow Anna stepping into her newfound role, another question lingers: what comes next? How will she rise to the challenges ahead, And what unexpected alliances or obstacles will emerge? Will their vision withstand the resistance of an entrenched system, or will the ripple of change grow into a wave that reshapes the future? But perhaps the most intriguing question is the one only you can answer. What would you do if given the chance to challenge the system? Would you act, like Anna, or would fear of failure hold you back? If you're as captivated by Anna and Elon's mission as we are, let us know. Drop a 2 in the comments if you're eager to see what happens next in their groundbreaking journey. Together, let's uncover how their courage inspires a movement, and how it might inspire the courage in you.